DealQuest listeners and viewers, I am so excited to have Mel Abraham on the upcoming episode of DealQuest. I can't even tell you Mel's background in deals and finances and money, and I'm blessed to have him as a friend of mine. You're going to love this episode. Mel, what are people going to hear about on your upcoming episode of DealQuest?
Oh my gosh, we're going to hit on a couple of things, big things. I think one from deals, but also how does an entrepreneur live their life? How do we do things in a way that builds a business, has an impact on people, but allows us to live a life that we want? And we'll talk about some of the challenges, the obstacles that get in the way, and what we can do to kind of get through them and move through them so we can elevate, our purpose and what we're doing.
I love it, folks. And listen, you're going to hear, Mel's got a lot of personal experience, whether, it's his own background in valuing and buying and selling businesses and consulting, his cancer journey, we're going to talk about, I know. And also, don't miss this. He's got a launch coming up on an amazing course, folks, that you're going to want to hear about on his episode of DealQuest. So check it out.
Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started.
DealQuest listeners and viewers, I'm so excited to have Mel Abraham as a guest. Mel is a friend and an amazing guy. He's a CPA by education, but an entrepreneur by exhilaration, and author of the #1 bestseller, The Entrepreneur's Solution, The Modern Millionaire's Path to More Profit, Fans, and Freedom. He's also the founder of Thoughtpreneur Academy and Business Breakthrough Academy, where he helps entrepreneurs bring their businesses to the world and build the lifestyle they want. After finding a cancerous tumor in his bladder larger than a baseball in June 2019, and successfully conquering it within 18 months, Mel began openly teaching the Affluence Blueprint. This is important because his cancer journey spotlighted the immediate and urgent need for entrepreneurs to find financial liberation and peace of mind. I can go on and on. I mean, he has been, a guest speaker. He shared stages with people like Arianna Huffington and Brendan Burchard and Tony Robbins. He's bought and sold his own businesses. He's advised other people on buying and selling businesses. He's a CPA. I mean, on and on and on. But his full bio is in the show notes. Check him out. He's a super impressive guy. And I'm so excited to have Mel Abraham on the DealQuest podcast. Welcome, Mel.
Well, man, thanks for having me, Corey. It's so good to be here and get a chance to chat.
So, Mel, before we go into all this great stuff you have going on, and I know you have a launch coming up, and I'm going to want people to hear about that and, your deal experience, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because for most folks, it's not what they're doing now, but who knows? You tell me.
Well, so here's the thing. When you put the range from 8 to 12, I actually got my first entree into entrepreneurship during that age time. My dad and I were sitting one day watching a movie with Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. It was about Harry Houdini's life.
Okay.
And I was intrigued by this guy that no chains would hold. And I started reading, and you hear, and I read so much about what he did and how he built his business, his reputation during that time. And so I got fascinated with that and magic. And so when I was 10 years old, I started to learn magic, and there happened to be a magic shop across the valley. And I would take the RTD, the bus, across the valley to this magic shop during the summer months every day. And I would sit there and I would learn and I would listen and some guy comes in and says something about, hey, I got a gig this weekend and this and that. And then he leaves. And I asked the owner, I said, what's a gig? He says, that's how he's doing a show. So he's getting paid. I said, I can get paid to do this? So he said, yeah. And so I went home. I designed a show for kids' birthday parties, which I started to do. I was getting paid $50 for a half-hour show. Now we're talking about
Nice.
It was 11, so it was 1972. So it was a long time ago. So it was a lot of money for an 11-year-old kid. And I would dress up as a clown. So now here's a lesson here. You want to know your market, because I quickly found out that kids are scared of clowns. But that was the thing that got kind of lit a fire in me about this whole idea of, man, you can actually do what you can actually get paid doing the things that you love and having an impact on people, whether it's having fun and getting put a smile. So that's where I started to play around with the idea of show business and this and that, which clearly I'm far upstream from show business.
Right. But the entrepreneurship part of it has endured.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. One more question looking back. What is the first deal of any type? It could be something when you were young as a kid or later, that comes to mind. Like first thing you would consider a deal.
The first deal as a kid was probably negotiating the purchase of a Ford Bronco.
Okay.
That I have an identical twin brother, and we did this without dad knowing, and it turned into a disaster actually, because we went into a car dealership and we didn't know anything about negotiating, but they certainly did.
Oh yes.
And we drove out with this Ford Bronco, this brown Ford Bronco, and drove up home. And mom and dad were like, "What are you doing?" And "Oh no, we're good." We never thought about, oh, there's insurance, there's gas, there's upkeep, and it didn't take us, but I think 6 months or 8 months before we realized this isn't going to work. And dad helped us sell it again. But that was probably the first deal that I ever did. Just coming out of high school. But the reality is that when it came down to acquisitions and deals, I went out of college as a CPA. I passed the exam before I finished college. I went to one of the large consulting firms back then. It was Pete Marwick, and then became KPMG.
Sure.
The first job they put me, I was in the audit department. I was going the traditional path. The first job they put me on was to audit and do an inventory for a company by the name of Bandini in August. Bandini manufactures fertilizer. So I was in a 3-piece suit with galoshes up to the thighs in steaming manure in August, going, this is what I went to school for. And then one of the partners from the merger and acquisition group came to me and said, I hear you understand how to use spreadsheets. Now, back then we were using something called Multiplan.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. He says, do you think you could help us model an acquisition and merger of 3 insurance companies? And I said, probably. Tell me what we need to do. And so I went and did the modeling for this acquisition for the consulting engagement. And it was after that I sat back and I said, this beats inventorying manure. Is there any way I can transfer to the consulting department? And so I transferred into the merger and acquisition group and finished my tenure at KPMG and Pete Marwick in that group doing consulting and M&A and valuations. I did enough. I did enough to qualify for my CPA that they would loan me out to the audit department. But the majority of my time was in that realm. And that's where I started to get the experience of valuation and deal structuring.
In connection with deals, what was some of the maybe more, surprising or initial things that you learned that were maybe a little surprising or something?
The thing for me, I had a really good mentor at Pete, and he took me under his wing, and we were negotiating a deal. Now he had a connection with our Japanese practice. So a lot of the deals he was doing were with Japanese firms coming to the US and vice versa. And so one of the things that I got from him was this idea, because I came into it doing spreadsheets and analysis and numbers, but he always came from a merger, if you will, or an acquisition of cultures, an acquisition of connection. And so there was always this process that or this element of his looking at the deal and saying, how do we negotiate it? How do we structure it so we feed, if you will, the culture, the connection with them in a very different way. So there was a fair amount of customs that I learned under his belt. So looking at other acquisitions and saying, is there a culture element? And it was more than numbers at that point. And it was probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, which I think is impactful on a lot of deals going south, and when we don't think about those things.
Yeah, no question. And, and obviously, and that was a time, I think in the last 10, probably 15 years, this conversation of culture, right, has become so much more prevalent. There's been books written on it, that kind of stuff. But, back then it was less talked about. I think as any good deal lawyer or accountant or anybody, consultant or whatever, knew it was important, but it wasn't in the popular lexicon yet. It wasn't something people talked about. It was even in the deal world, in my mind, it was less of a open, I think the smart people were looking at it, but it wasn't something that you openly talked about, right? You talked about deal structure and fit and numbers and what's going to come to the bottom line and efficiencies and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was less popular than to talk about outright, right?
It really was. The thing is that in that realm, what this mentor was showing me is that the other side actually didn't want to have the conversations about the deal until we got the formalities of the personalities in play. And they separated the two. They said, let's break bread, let's connect, and then we can talk business.
Well, and part because you said that was Japanese, right? There was some Japanese players involved, right? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, I remember it was I think things have evolved, but back then it was such a cultural difference because, the classic US was like, okay, what's the deal? What are we doing? Let's get down to business. And other cultures, certainly the Japanese culture. I remember, I'll just trigger a quick story. I think I might have told this once before, but we had a major deal with a Japanese buyer back in the, it must have been in the 80s, because I think I was either a first-year associate or maybe even a summer associate at a law firm. And we actually had a cultural consultant that we hired for the deal to make sure that there were no faux pas, right? And, and it was everything from even how you accept a business card traditionally in Japanese, right? You don't just glance at it and stick it in your pocket, right? You with both hands, you review it, you look at it, you acknowledge it.
There's a reverence to it.
You put it down, there's a reverence, exactly. So we knew all that stuff, and we got to the closing table. And again, I'm a summer associate, a first-year associate. I have no sway in this. I'm just there, running copies and proofreading. And we got through the whole deal without any kind of faux pas, whatever. We're literally, in a conference room, big conference room with documents lined up, and all these people, Japanese lined up to sign. My client signed it. Our client lined up to sign. And next thing we know, there's this big, something goes wrong, right? We don't know what it is. They're talking in Japanese or consultants. Well, apparently what we were not advised on and what my firm at that time hadn't done was gotten special pens, special ceremonial pens, right? We just had regular pens, right? And the culture is that you actually give a pen as a gift. They sign this one document, this one set of documents, one deal with that pen. That's it. And then that pen is a momentum of the deal. Well, they failed to do that. So literally we had to send, somebody out to run. In those days, it was cross pens to the stationery store and get nice cross pens for the deal, and then the deal closed. So it was, it was interesting what could derail the deal.
It really is interesting how those little things can derail something because there becomes this personal disconnect.
Yeah. So Mel, let's jump for a second. I didn't even do it justice. I don't think in your bio. I didn't. Your bio is so extensive and so impressive. I didn't want to read it all, but I do want people to get a better feel for them what was in the bio of really what you're doing now, who you help, who you serve, and how you serve them.
Oh, so like you said, I'm a CPA. My primary focus as a CPA, as I come through this, was really valuing businesses. Working in deals and working in litigation and mediation, typically commercial litigation, tax litigation, and that kind of thing. So I was always in the middle of value and that type of thing. And then that that skill set, I realized had other benefits, other things that I could have done. So that bridged into, and at this entree, this was probably 15, 16 years ago now, I did a valuation for a company that was founded in the 1800s, late 1800s. And they said they wanted to sell. And I'm looking at I valued the business. I'm looking at it. They're losing margin. They're losing market share. And I'm in this board meeting with these, older generations are sitting there. And I said, this is not the time to sell. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, you just went over the edge of the rapids and you want to jump out of the ship. You're going to get hurt. You're going to lose money. And they said, well, what do you expect us to do? And I said, we retrench, we rebuild our margins, we rebuild our market share. And then if you choose to sell, we can sell at that point. And they said, well, how do we do that? I said, now, mind you, they had no debt. I said, they're completely debt adverse. And they were stripping out probably $100,000 to $200,000 a month in dividends to the shareholders. Okay. And I said, stop the dividends, reinvest in the company. You'd have thought the devil was speaking. So I leave that meeting, and literally a year goes by and I get a phone call from the chairman of the board. And he said, I know you probably never expected I would call you, but would you be our first outside director?
Wow.
And so that I had no idea that directorship is just like I didn't know that you could do a magic gig and get paid. All of a sudden, directorship. So now I spend a lot of time consulting with entrepreneurs. I sit on a number of boards of directors as an outside director or as a shareholder director in some cases. And I consult. And a lot of my work is mentoring and coaching entrepreneurs and businesses to build their business, but also understanding that most shareholders, most entrepreneurs, they're looking for something beyond the business, and that is financial independence, financial freedom, and those kinds of things. And so I have, in the recent years, started to really spend some time working with them, saying, how does the business and your financial independence work together to make that happen?
Great. And then you have some training programs as well, right? Of various types. So why don't you give us a little bit on that? And I know you got a launch coming up. I want you to mention that, and then we'll circle back and talk some more deals. Oh,
yeah, you got it. So I do have some training programs. One is the Affluence Blueprint, is my main signature program. This is really how I built my wealth and my businesses. And just to give you a little backstory about it is, I was a single full-time dad building a business, building a practice. And I had at the time, Jeremy was 6 years old, and he came running into me saying, Daddy, I drew a picture of you at school today. And here I am. I've been down. I'm thinking I'm going to see this picture of, this studly guy. But there I was as a stick figure, staring at two computer screens and one phone in each ear and one on the desk ringing. And I said, oh, man, I'm screwing it up. And he's been one of the greatest gifts to me, and I was botching, and it would have been easy for me to sit back and say, hey, but kid, this is how we keep the roof over our heads. This is how we can do Disneyland and all that. But he didn't see that we weren't doing that. And that's when I started to realize that this idea of work-life balance is a myth. It's really about work-life harmony, because balance insinuates you got two counterbalancing elements. And so how do we harmonize the things in life and the things in business together so they coexist? And that then fast forward to 2019. So I changed my business. I changed how I looked at money, how I built money and business and money from that time forward. And I didn't realize how important it was. But 2019, as you know, they found a 5-centimeter tumor in my bladder, which turned out when they went in to be 7.5 centimeters. So I found myself dealing with cancer that not that anyone ever thinks it would happen, but I didn't have the risk factors. But they're looking at me going into a surgery saying it's on the prostate. We might have to remove the prostate. We can't see the ureter on the right side. So we might have to put a tube in and a bag for the kidney. And if it's bad, you may lose your bladder. And so my life just got completely flipped upside down. And coming out of that, and fast forward, 3 surgeries, 4 tumors, 42 treatments. I'm clear. I'm clean. I've been clean. I go back in for a scope in November. That'll be 18 months. Feel great. But the thing that was the aha and what made me move forward with the Affluence Blueprint in a broader way is I've been working one-on-one with clients, but I came through this cancer. I shut down my business for 2 years. I spent the time focused on my healing. I had to fight the cancer emotionally, physically, medically, psychologically, energetically, but I didn't have to fight it financially. Wow. And coming off the heels of the cancer, we had the pandemic, and I had a lot of my colleagues and friends coming to me saying, how did you do it? Because we realized the importance of doing this now. And they knew that I was doing it one-on-one with clients, but they said, why are you not teaching them more broadly? And so what we've done with the Affluence Blueprint is said, let's give the system, let's give the process to make it happen. We look at, like, my son's 31, his wife's 28. They just had their first child. And the things that we do, and it's not hard stuff. It's not complicated stuff. It's just discipline and process. At 31 and 28, they have 3 homes and a multi-million-dollar net worth already, so I started calling him my 401k. So he's going to take it. But I think that's what brought this to the surface, is this idea of how do we deal with where the intersection of business, wealth, and life come together in a way that allows us to not be entrapped by the business, imprisoned by the business, or imprisoned by life, but we actually truly live free financially.
I love that. And, folks on this podcast who just know me otherwise have I use the word integration instead of balance. It's the same exact conversation. Yeah. I came to that same conclusion a long time ago, that that balance is impossible, but there are people now, it's become popular to say balance is impossible, but they say it in a way where they just, like, they've given up, or they just say that, it's a very different conversation to say balance is impossible, because not because the paradigm's wrong. Right? Because the thinking on it's wrong, right? If you held all these things as separate, no, you cannot juggle all of them. Something's going to drop. But if you think about integration, you make different decisions, right? For me, it affects where I live, right? There's a reason why my firm went virtual 6 years before the pandemic, or 5 years before the pandemic. And that's because I made a living decision that I wanted to split time between New York and California. And in order to be able to do that, we had to be able to set up to work virtually. And then I realized my team loved working virtually. And then we, had all the advantage of being able to hire people and, not subject to geography. We ran the business at a higher profit margin because we dropped, we only had meeting space when we needed it. All of these things that everybody has now started really doing during the pandemic. Plus, we didn't miss a beat in the pandemic. Now, where did that come from? Was it because I was totally prescient about the future? Not necessarily. It was because I was making work-life integration or harmonization decisions on what I wanted my life to be like and how would that work. And that led me to make business decisions that benefited me financially, and then set me up to be powerfully set up to not miss a beat when the pandemic came.
This is so good, because to me, when you talk about integration or harmonization, there has to be a level of intention to the choices you're making. Whereas in most cases, people don't realize it, including myself. I went through the same thing when I was at Pete and KPMG, where you got on a boat and going down a current in a river, and you don't really know where you're going, and you have no oars and you're not steering. And so once we start to become intentional, whether it's about our business, our life, our relationships, our health, things shift.
Yeah. So obviously that's one of the principles. We're not going to give away the whole thing, and you couldn't. There's a reason why it's an opportunity for people to join. But what else? Just what are the fundamentals? Like, what are some of the things that somebody's going to learn in this course you got?
So there's 3 primary pillars. And the first is that we need to have a system to generate income and cash flow. We got to have a way to make it. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs excel, business owners excel. They make the money. They're doing well with the money. Where they fail is in the second pillar or the third pillar. The second pillar is that we have to have a system to accumulate it. Mm-hmm. We come to a business. Most of us come to business. I did the same. Come to the business and say, I'm going into business because I want to have control. I want to have freedom. I want to be able to do things my way, and that's it. And all of a sudden, you find you're what I call a treadmill entrepreneur. You're running, and the only thing you're doing is saying, you're like George Jetson on that treadmill, and you're going, get me off this crazy thing, and you can't get off of the thing. And the reason for it is that we believe that the business is going to give us freedom, but the business was never meant to give us freedom. The business was meant to create an impact and give us cash flow. Mm-hmm. And then we have to create the second machine, which is the money machine. So we have the business machine and the money machine. We create the money machine. That's where the freedom is. And this is where most entrepreneurs fail to consider, because they look at their business, say, one day I'll sell it, or one day and that's the windfall. And it may be, but why not create a little more diversification to make sure that you're not dependent on that one strategic sale that can or may come in, or a pandemic that harms your business. And now the sale you thought you were going to have, you can't have. And so there's this level of accumulate pillar that we need to think about. And the mindset that you need and the skill set that you need for generate is different than what you need for accumulate. Yeah. And so in one case, we're trying to maximize opportunities, minimize downside, and take on some risk. But in the accumulate, we're completely risk averse. We're trying to preserve, we're trying to build, we're trying to multiply. If generate is making it, accumulate is multiplying it. Yeah. And then,
so before we go to the third, I mentioned this before, but I want to give a shout out to Barbara Uson, formerly Stanny, who's a phenomenal coach, works mainly with women around finances and stuff like that. And she's a friend of ours, friend of my wife's. And I had one call with Barbara many years ago in which she said to me, she got my financial history and whatever. And this is exactly the point that Mel's making here, which is why I want to say it. And she said, boy, because I had my ups and downs. Like I was always able to make money, but in terms of having the wealth built up. And she said to me, boy, you know how to generate income. You just don't know how to build wealth. And the funny part is just getting, I'm a big believer that the start of any change is to get a new distinction, right? Yeah. So just having that new distinction that she put in my mind changed everything for me. And I have since built significantly more wealth than I ever did. And by the way, I've had more income, but the wealth building is actually not related to the more income, because in the past I would have had more income and I would have gone somehow, right? Yeah. So it was that mindset shift, oh, wait a second. Generating income and building wealth are two different things. And I got that one on lock, but this one I got to put some systems in place. I got to focus on that. I got to learn how to build wealth. I don't know how to do that. I know how to generate a lot of income, but so that's the point there. And then you were about to go to the third.
Yeah, and I know of Barbara. I've read her stuff, listened to her stuff. She's great. So yeah. And then the third pillar is insulate. So it's generate, accumulate, and insulate. And look, the more as unfortunate as it may be, the more successful you are, the bigger the target may be on your back. And so we need to insulate from a variety of risks, whether it's lawsuits or losses or claims, or just, I wiped out 1/3 of my net worth in a Ponzi scheme. Not that I did it intentionally. It sounded like I did, but how do we protect not only what we've built, but our ability to build it? So, in that section, I talk about things like I had herniated 3 discs in my back in from a bike accident in 2009. And I was out for a while, but I had a disability policy that covered everything. And I negotiated with them. They wrote me a big 6-figure check so I could just focus on healing. And so whether it's risk mitigation or ensuring it, that there's ways that we need to make sure that we protect some things, and had this conversation with someone recently about they don't have a trust, they don't have, and they said, well, I said, no, I said, you actually have an agreement in place. The question is it agreement by choice or is it an agreement by legality? Because the government will take over and do what they think is right with your assets and the things that you want and your children and your grandchildren. I said, are you prepared to allow that to happen? And they go, no. I said, well, we need to figure that out.
Love it. So, and just we'll spend one more second on this, and I want to circle back to some more deal stuff. But so you've got a launch coming up on this product. So what should people know?
So I'm doing a 3-part live training series starting October 28th. So I'll start digging into some of these things. There's an action guide and workbook that we're going through. It is a workshop. So the first part of it is for me to really cement in what's the affluence journey, what are the barriers to that journey, how does that come into play, and how do we quash those barriers. The second training will be what are the 5 core principles, that wealth building principles that affluent entrepreneurs really need to have in place. Some of them may surprise folks. And in really figuring out what I call your lifestyle wealth target is, what is that number? Because too often this is something that, most of what I teach is because it happened to me. Right. When I had the bike accident, I had a dear friend who had retired at 36 years old come and take me out to lunch. I'm in a neck brace. I'm stuttering. I had a grade 4 concussion. And he looked at me and he said, how much is enough? Mm. And I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm still delirious. I go, what are you talking about? He says, how much is enough? He said, the reason you got in that bike accident is you were distracted. You were running. You were stressed out. You were angry. And you don't know where your finish line is.
Wow.
And I go, oh, man. So we never know when we get there. So we're on that treadmill and we keep running. And so one of the things that we're going to do in that second training is let's figure out where the finish line is. And then in the third training, I'll walk through the 9 accelerators of the 3 pillars of the affluence blueprint. So they understand specifically which of those 9 they might be lacking, where they need it, and that type of thing. So those are the 3 trainings we're going to go through, deep dive, and try to make it happen.
Love it. So, folks, this episode is going to air on the 27th. So the first training is tomorrow. If you're hearing this, yep. If you happen to, listen to this a little later, a few days later, I'm sure you can go back and hop in, right, and get a recorded version, and then do the next couple live,
yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Okay. There'll be an all access page where I'll have all the trainings for everyone and the resources.
Awesome.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
So, it's interesting. I was thinking as you were talking, because, of course, I did not have the benefit of your wisdom and this 3-part strategy when I went through my journey on this. It's been great to get to know you since. And, it's so funny. I'm very blessed to have some amazing folks, not only Mel, my good friend and client, David Bach, who, I'm like, why didn't I read The Automatic Millionaire back, when he wrote it, or after that, or the Latte Factory is out, much more recently, whatever. And just the simple idea of if I put away X% of the money I earned from the time I was 20, how much, 25 or whatever, how much better I would have been now and other stuff. But the point is that, I'm around these folks now, and it's been real blessing. And, I was thinking when you're talking about the 3 stages and how, you earn it, you accumulate it, right? And then, you move into this, and there's risk involved in that, and you move into the stage where, you're going to more protect it. But what's interesting to me, and I don't know if you talk about this in your training, but what I realized to me, as I have learned to build wealth, thank you, Barbara, and I've had more of it, it actually has obviously made me more secure, the things I do to protect that. But it has also freed me up to take more risk right?
Yeah.
On the business side, because I'm like, hey, I can make this investment. I can do this bet. I can, in fact, listen, I'm just starting to look now for a very senior attorney that's going to cost me a chunk of money, right? I don't have full-time work for this person right now, but I know that it's for me to continue to grow. In fact, I've artificially been limiting growth because I want to make sure we can provide great service to clients. I'm going to make that investment. Well, it's a heck of a lot easier to make that investment. Now, listen, I have a level of confidence we'll build the business, it'll pay off, whatever. But even if it doesn't, right, I know I can fund these multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? If I need to. And while I wouldn't love to lose that money, I can do it, right?
Yeah.
So it actually, that kind of, the more you're protected, whatever, actually, I think there's a circle back where it actually frees you up to take more risk, including the ability to do more deals.
Well, I totally agree with you. The whole idea behind, there's a couple of reasons to build wealth. One is to give you options and everything. But the other thing is, to me, this whole idea is about how do I get my dollars to work harder for me than I had to for them.
Right.
And so I got to put them to work. And when we do that, we take strategic risks. I do the same thing. I invest in other companies and I'm in a software company. I may go into another software company, and I'm willing to do it. And I go, okay, like I did a cancer drug a while back, and I may lose the money, but I'm willing to take the shot. And it's not, like you said, I don't want to lose money, but at the same time, I can make some strategic bets and be okay with it and be comfortable. And I know that it's not going to take any food off our table, and we can have those opportunities. And so I do think that you can approach deals, whether it's a deal you're doing with yourself, 100% yourself, or like I am, is as in effect like an angel investor and that type of thing, where I can get involved in a deal or behind a movement that I choose to get behind and that kind of thing, because we've built enough that we now have that ability to do so.
Yeah. So there's a place I want to go, because one of the things that fascinates me, and I'd love to get my guests to some of my guests at least to talk about it, which is this mindset conversation, right? The mindset of a deal maker. And some folks think, when you think about the mindset of a deal maker, you think about those things about, they're risk takers and they're right, good at their feet or whatever, they're good negotiators, like that kind of mindset stuff. But I'm talking about, I'll take anything you have to offer on the conversation of mindset. But also, I've seen a lot of folks, even folks who may initially have the reputation of good deal makers, like blow themselves up because of, all kinds of stuff, whether it's relationship to money, whether it's, we know people in the personal growth industry, for example, where, Mel's got connections and contacts to work with people. So have I, who were big time players who blew themselves up. Right. And, you sort of wonder how somebody like that, and some people come to the conclusion that it was all a fraud and a house of cards and fake to begin with. And that may be true with some of them, but with a lot of them, I don't believe that's true. I believe that they actually had a good intention. They were looking to build something. They did build something at a certain point, but then it blew up on them. So, and sometimes that's related to the mindset. So in working with people, in understanding both deals, and also, when you work with people around, like, that you're going to do in this course, a lot of it is so around the right mindset, right? And relationship to finances. And that brings up stuff about their self-worth and how they were raised, right? Like there's a lot of stuff underneath that. So I want to open it up for, any observations or thoughts that you have.
I love this conversation, Corey, because I did a bunch of interviews of people when I was kind of doing some research and everything. And people were anywhere from startups to $1 million to $100 million to even having a conversation with someone that sold their company for over $1.2 billion. Every single one of them, without question, every single one of them had some level of guilt, shame, or embarrassment about money, about wealth, about what they've done, whether it was because they had it or because they didn't have it.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that we need to realize is that whether it's business, we talk freer about business than we do about financials, because it's financial, it's wealth disguised as business. And now that's okay. It's not taboo, but we bring with it whatever baggage we have. I'm ashamed in a sense to say this, but when I first started building the firm, I was a jerk I was a horrible manager, and I had no idea. And, I was going through a rough patch in my personal life, and I brought it to work with me. And the receptionist, I had no idea. I found this out later. Once I turned the corner and realized the error of my ways.
Sure.
She would put a different color Post-it note on the top of her computer. So when people walked into the firm, they knew whether Mel was in a good mood. It was horrible. But here's what I'm getting at, is that things happen to us. And there's the set of facts. We hear things, whether it's, mom and dad arguing about money, or the media, or the demonization of businesses, or Wall Street, whatever it is. We hear something, we see something, and we see some facts. But what we do is then we overlay on it interpretations.
Yeah.
And it's those interpretations that get us in trouble. We interpret that money is evil. We interpret that building business is wrong, or whatever you want to do, or is that all they care about it is money. And when we interpret that in turn creates what I call a money identity, a threshold, if you will, that we live into and not because of. And until we're willing to take a critical look and separate the facts, let's just look at an example. Like I said, I got involved in a Ponzi scheme. I got involved in an investment in 2004. By 2005, I realized it was a Ponzi scheme. I was in it deep, 1/3 of my net worth. Me and 2 other friends were into it for $4.5 million. So when it came about, one of my buddies, he was angry. He was resentful. He started to drink. He destroyed his marriage. He destroyed his business. He destroyed his liver. He's just coming out of it. Wow. In the last 2 years. So that's 2005. We're talking 15 years have gone by. The other one was a guy that had since retired. And so all he did was adjust his lifestyle. He had the smallest amount in there and just kept on living. And then there was me. I started to go down that resentment road and all of that, and but I started to beat myself up. I said, I'm a CPA, I'm a financial guy, I'm an idiot. How can I do this? I can't consult to people. They shouldn't hire me. And all that interpretation that was going on would have destroyed me if it wasn't for my son, Jeremy, where I sat back and said, he's watching. And if he sees that the way to deal with adversity is to curl up in the corner, then I'm setting him up for a life of pain too. And so that's what got me to say, wait a second, what's the facts? The facts are I put money in. The facts are it was a Ponzi scheme. The facts are he stole it. The facts are he's a schmuck. The facts are he's in jail. All the rest of it was my shading of it.
Yeah.
And if we're and once I understood that, then I could deal with the stories that were impacting my life and separate out. And so if people are struggling and say, well, how do we know the facts from the interpretation? The facts are what you would see through a camera lens. Without emotion, with no sound, with nothing. You're just looking through the viewfinder and you say, oh, he gave him money. Oh, he stole the money. Oh, he's going to jail. That's it. Everything else is an interpretation. And I think that when we understand that, we have at least in our hands, the ability to shift and change things.
Yeah, you and I are so aligned on this. I mean, I did some personal growth work that, that is aligned with that. And, talks about how the thing with human beings is that we're meaning-making machines, right? Like we make everything mean something. And the ability to make that distinction between like facts and, and meaning or interpretation is so key. And, and even it comes in, like I don't know why I thought about this the other day, so I'll mention it. There became this thing, and some friends of mine really got into it, whether it's the, miracle morning, like if you get up early, you're more successful or whatever, or this thing about I forget, it was been an Army general. Somebody gave this speech about how making your bed every
Making
day,
your bed. Yeah, it was
right. That was the big thing. Like, you make your bed, and that means that, you're starting the day, you're on it, you're organized, you're together, you're right. And for me, I'm not like, if that works for you, great, run with it, go make your bed, right? But the thing that people don't realize is that's not true or not true, right?
Yeah.
In other words, the only thing that is fact in that case is you either made your bed or you didn't make your bed.
Exactly.
Neither of them mean anything other than the fact that you either made your bed or didn't make your bed, right? So for me, it's always the context you put around it. And what I spend a lot more time on is looking not about what's right or wrong or true or not true, because the truth is everything's seen through a filter anyway, and it's hard to know, that in terms of our personal life on whether, does making a bed every morning make you more successful? Well, and not objectively, but you know what? If you hold the context that it does, then it does. And by the way, if that's going to be an empowering context for you, then go make your bed every morning. I can create a context around not making my bed every morning that says that I only do the stuff that's in my highest and best use areas. I'm not going to spend any time on doing anything that doesn't really move the needle. So I don't make my bed in the morning because it would be a waste of my time. I could spend that 2 minutes, doing something better. And if that's empowering to me, it's not any more right or wrong than the people who use making their bed as empowering. The question is whether it's empowering or disempowering, right? Yeah. The truth is, I actually lean that way, but I have another context called my wife really likes the bed made. So when she's around, I make the bed to keep her happy. You see, that's my context around the making the bed. But my point is,
you are so, you and I are like on point with the same thing. I don't do it. My wife loves to do it.
Yeah. And listen, I joke because we have a seemingly neutral rule that says the last one up has to make the bed. Of course, she always gets up earlier than me. So, it has a discriminatory effect. I'm always the one making the bed. But my point more so is that, everything, and that's a little example, but everything is about, in my mind, the context you create for it. And so if we're meaning making machines, let's make a meaning that's empowering for us as opposed to disempowering. It's not right or wrong. The people who make their bed, if it's empowering for them, that's right for them. For me, it's empowering maybe not to make my bed, right? So, and it's interesting for me because I don't think this conversation is unrelated. And in fact, I think it's very related to the mindset of a deal maker, right? Yes. In other words, what is your mindset around what deals mean? If deals mean something that you have no idea, you get afraid of, you don't know what you're doing, you take risks, or even that you're going to do them out of some ego-driven or growth, external pressure to look a certain way or grow a certain way, you're going to do bad deals, right? But if you're going to do them out of a clear why, and it's going to be an empowering context, I'd love to hear your thoughts on
that. I think that you're right on point with all of that. And I think that also impacts your ability to negotiate a good deal because things get in the way. Once we understand what the other side's really reaching for, then we have the ability to start to structure things in a way that potentially puts us not at odds or across the table from each other, but sitting side by side trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that too often we come to a deal where one side's trying to give, the other side's trying to get. And that is a hard place to get a deal done. And I think that yet when we're willing to come to it empathetically and say, let me understand what we're trying to accomplish, because it may not have anything to do with the price, the terms, there may be something else. And when we understand that overarching context, especially when we're doing deals with small, closely held businesses and I've had this conversation numerous times from a valuation standpoint, because I've had the sole owner come to me and say, I've been working this business for 25 years and I come in and I value it. And they go, there's no way, it's 25 years. I said, understand something. Your buyers will buy economic value. You're trying to sell sentimental value. They don't want it. And I said, I know it's hard to accept, but yet if we were trying to negotiate a deal and we understood those other elements of the deal that are qualitative, then maybe we could present something to them that satisfies them and get a deal done that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Mel, I could talk to you forever, but we are coming on time. So I want to Before I ask you my last question, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find out more about you generally, and then also specifically about this upcoming launch.
Oh, I appreciate it. So generally they can, I'm on Instagram at melabraham9. I'm on all of the webs, YouTube, Facebook, and my main website is melabraham.com. The training that we're doing, if you just go to affluencelive.com, you can jump in. It's free, and just register and go through the training. And I also have a weekly show just like this called the Affluent Entrepreneur Show, and I'll answer questions on there. I'll bring guests on, which Corey, we're going to get you on, and then I'll do some solo shows, some of the principles, some of my frameworks and everything. So those are the places that to find me and follow me. And if there's anything that comes up, reach out to me. I love having conversations.
Awesome. So folks, again, if you're listening to this, the day it comes out, the first training is tomorrow, the 28th, right?
Yep, 28th.
Of March. And give that URL one last time.
Affluencelive.com.
Affluencelive.com. So Mel, to finish up, my final question of the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from oppression from all people in the world to the reason I'm an entrepreneur and haven't had a boss for a long time. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Oh my gosh. So you're right. Like you set me up. So I look at an affluent entrepreneur and I think there's three critical outcomes. One is that they live a richer life. Yeah. Richer lifestyle. And I'm using the term richer because that's the experience and feelings you have from what you do and not the money you have. They have a deeper impact, meaning that they impact externally towards the people that they serve, but they impact to the right and left to the people they love, and they impact backwards to themselves.
Wow. And
number three is that they have complete freedom. And that freedom, the most elemental basic freedom, which is what most people think they want, is financial freedom. I know that's what I wanted, what I thought I wanted. But there's two freedoms above that I think really start to drive things. And the cancer really brought this home even more solid for me. And that is the second level up is time freedom.
Yes.
The freedom to choose my time when I want to do it, to be able to do what I want to do. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I've got colleagues that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and they're miserable.
Yeah.
You know, they're imprisoned by their wealth. They're imprisoned by what they do. So they might have a really nicely decorated prison cell, but they're in prison anyways, you know, so time freedom. So the ability to do that. And then the last level of freedom for me is mind freedom.
Yes.
Have the peace of mind to know that I lived in alignment with my values, with what I was here to do, what I was chosen to do, that I've cared for the people that I care about, and that I left an impact that makes sense. You know, my tagline is to make sure that we always live a life that outlives us.
Yes. Love that, Mel. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Oh man, thank you for having me, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.coreykupfer.com/dealden. That's coreykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.